Hi, my name is Kristina, and I am a survivor of childhood and adulthood sexual abuse. And I was around 3 years old when I first reported to my mom that someone had touched me. I don't really remember exactly how I said it. I just remember letting my mom know that I was burning really, really bad in my private area. She took me to the doctor. The doctor did let my mom know that something did happen to me. Someone did touch me. I just don't know or remember who or how they did exactly what they did to me. So shortly after the doctor's visit, I remember there was like a psychologist or psychiatrist, I believe. With this psychiatrist, they had me look at like shapes and sizes of different things to try to see if I understood exactly what had happened to me. My parents, they were actually very young when they had me. My mom was 17, my dad was 16, and my mother was a single mother. My dad struggled with at a very early age. My mom had me when she was 17, and then she had my sister when she was 19. My mother lived on her own. We had our own apartment. We lived in a project building down in St. Pete. The next incident where I was molested, it was my mom's friend. I remember one particular evening, I think it might have been around like Christmas time or so, because I had on this really long dress. And that particular night, when we got back home to our apartment, my mother's friend had stayed the night with us, and we all slept in one bed. And I remember waking up. This guy was between my legs. He was licking me and touching me, and I think right before he was about to insert himself inside of me, my mom woke up. She actually kept a machete under the bed. So what she did was she grabbed the machete when she seen what he was doing to me, and she went to like swing it. So he jumped up. Now, I do believe that my mom might have cut him or striked him like right above his eye. He jumped up. He got off the bed. He ran out of the bedroom. Then he ran out of the front door. At the time, back in the day, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't even have a house phone. So what my mom did was she grabbed my sister and I. We ran out the front door, got into her car, and we went to the nearest payphone. And I believe she used the payphone to either call one of my uncles or call 911. Then, fast forward to age 5, we ended up moving into a home with some relatives. This particular relative had children who were older than my sister and I. My mother was going through a lot during that time. I want to say my grandmother had passed away. Around that time, one of my cousins, a female cousin, she began to sexually abuse me and molest me. It started off with us taking baths together. She was about 12 or 13 and I was 5 at the time. She would begin to touch my private areas while we were in the actual tub. And then too, her parents had a huge porn collection. So I began to watch pornography at age 5, and I would watch it with her and my other older cousins at the time that they were supposed to be actually babysitting me because my mom worked. And when their parents weren't home, that's when what happened. So then it moved from the bathtub of my older cousin molesting me and touching me. It went from that to us watching pornography together alone, just her and I. And everything that she's seen in the pornography videos, she would actually do it to me. And I would also be honest to say, age 5, I had developed an addiction to pornography. And the other thing that she would do, she would not only have me watch the pornographic material with her, she would also force herself on me. She would force me to perform oral sex on her. I remember one time we were at my great-grandmother's house, and I think she might have been like an indentured servant back in the day or something like that. The people that she worked for, the employer, I believe that they allowed her to keep that home, and it had like so many bedrooms, and I want to say it had maybe 3 or 4 floors. And one of the things my cousin would do, she liked to do like exotic stuff, like she'll climb outside the window, and then because there were like a ledge that we could actually step on and stuff like that, so she would do stuff like that. But this particular afternoon, I remember once she came back in through the window, she had me lay down in the bed and she got on top of me. She pinned me down with her legs. I remember her forcing me to have oral sex on her at that time. And this particular time, she urinated in my mouth. And I think that was probably like the most degrading thing. And I never said anything about it, even though I knew that what she was doing to me was wrong. I never thought to just tell my mom about it or anything like that, because some of it I enjoyed the feeling of it. That lasted for about 2 years. She would also tease and taunt me often about the fact that in certain areas of my body I was producing. I think because of the hormone thing, and I have heard where your body can begin to produce certain things like hair in certain areas. And that's what I began to produce at age 5. And I believe that was because of me starting with, having been molested at a very early age. She would tell me things like, oh, you should cut the pubic hair and put it in your hair because you're so bald head, and like just teasing and tying me about crazy stuff. However, if we fast forward, she came to me 3 times to ask me to forgive her, and I did. And I love my cousin. I forgive my cousin for what she did. Then, age 7, my mom had married my stepdad, and he had 2 cousins who would come and spend the night with us at our house. The oldest cousin, he was probably about 15 maybe, and he would molest me. It's like, it didn't matter where we were. It'll be late at night if he'll see me, or if I come in the living room and he's there, he'll ask me to come, and then he'll begin to fondle me and touch on me and things as such. And again, I let it happen, even though I knew that it was wrong. And I never said anything about it until like years later. I later realized that I believe that he was trying to groom me to be with him, because that lasted until about age maybe 14. And at that time, he wanted to have an actual relationship with me. Also, we had a neighbor who invited myself and my sister to go to church with her one day. And I remember we were eager to go to the church and visit the church and fellowship with people and see them and all that. And I want to say I was about 10 at this time. However, coming back, this particular time, there was an older boy, and we were on the church bus headed back home. And what he started doing, like, he actually put his hand through the seat and he began to unbutton my dress so that he can slip his hand into my underwear, and he began to touch me like that. And I'm just sitting there like, okay. For me, I always felt like I was a target for it. Like, people just like, hey, let me do this, let me touch you, let me lick you, let me, and somehow once he did that, and he knew that he could actually put his hand through the seat and unbutton my dress and put his hand into my underwear, what he did was he got up and he actually sat in between my sister and I. So he ended up getting up and he sat in between us just so that he could touch me some more. And he molested me, I want to say probably, it seemed like forever. No one's seen him. I don't know if my sister seen him, but I felt like it was just he and I that was on the bus. Another incident, I had another cousin. My mom and my stepdad, they worked, so they had other relatives to actually watch us. And this particular relative, she had children. I think she had 2 boys, 2 girls, and one of the boys, every time I would go into the house to go use the bathroom, he would stand by the bathroom door and just wait for me. And this was also around that age of like maybe 10 or 11. And every time he'll see me, he'll wait until I come out of the bathroom, and he'll ask me to show him my private area. And then he'll touch my private area, and I'd be like, okay. And that lasted for a couple of years as well. And I never told anyone that until I actually wrote my book, and I put that in my book. If we fast forward to age 13, well, I have an aunt, and at the time, her and her family, they were stationed in Germany. My aunt and my cousin, they were actually visiting Florida for a couple of days, and she has some in-laws that actually came down from a different state to see them. So they all decided that, hey, we'll go to Busch Gardens. Busch Gardens is a theme park in Tampa, Florida. So we went there. And her brother-in-law, I think he was like 19 and I was 13 at the time. And what he started doing, I just seeing like, maybe he wanted me to like get on the rides with him and things like that. I'm like, okay, I'm having a good time. And at this time, at age 13, I think I was kind of struggling with my own sexual identity. So he wanted me to get on rides with him and stuff like that, which was cool. He asked me if it would be okay if I came back to the hotel with he and his mom. And he was like, hey, you and your sister, y'all can get in the pool. I'm like, well, that's cool. Like, who don't like getting in the pool, especially in Florida. I went back with them. I sat directly behind his mom because his mother was driving. He was in the passenger seat, and my sister sat next to me. And so I remember he kept looking back and he kept asking me, like, could I unbutton my shirt? And I was like, no. And he was like, can you just show me your breast? And I was telling him no. But again, it just kind of went over my head. So we get to the hotel. Once we got changed out, he took my sister and I down to the pool. And once we got into the pool, he began to sing to me. It was just weird, just singing. Then he began to fondle me. He began to touch me between my legs while we were in the pool together. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe maybe he liked me a whole lot more. So then he asked me, could I come to a bathroom with him? And I was like, okay. So we went into the bathroom. He began to touch on me some more, touching me between my legs, on my butt, and all this stuff. And I enjoyed the attention. I enjoyed how I felt. Right before he was about to insert himself, someone began to knock on the door, and that's when he stopped. So nothing happened. Nothing went beyond him just touching me, like there was no penetration. He did ask me, could I keep in touch with him? And I was like, yeah, I'll keep in touch. And at this time, I was thinking that, well, maybe we're now in a relationship. But mind you, again, I'm 13, just got out the 8th grade, and he was 19. I believe he had just graduated high school. Not only graduated high school, but he had a job. He was working at the bank. So he asked me, could I call him at certain times, and I did. And I would sneak and call him, because ain't no way my mom and my dad, they wouldn't want me talking to a boy. I knew that that was wrong. And then not only a boy, but someone who's 19. So what I would do is I would call him late at night, and then I would try to hide the phone bills when the phone bills came in, because I didn't want my parents to see that I was calling up to a different state. I also volunteered at a local hospital, and at this hospital I had access to the mail room, and along with envelopes and stamps and stuff like that. So then he asked me, could I write him? And I was like, yeah, that's cool. I began to write him letters and send him those letters. He never wrote me back, but now as a grown woman, I see why. It was inappropriate. It was an inappropriate relationship. My parents, they had found a letter in my purse, and it was, they seen that it was a letter addressed to him. And like my mom old school, so she's gonna go through your stuff, and she went through my stuff, and that's what she found, and she thought it was odd. Like, why are you writing him? Why are you writing him this letter in the first place? So when she opened the letter, like I said, I had stole a condom from Walgreens, and I put it inside the letter because, like I said, our conversations would be very sexual, and he would tell me all these sexual things he wanted to do to me. The other thing he would do, he'll ask me, can I urinate, like while I'm on the phone with him? And I'm just like, okay, this my boo, this my boyfriend, I'm gonna do whatever he want me to do. When I wrote the letter, I just kind of put everything in there, a lot of things that we had discussed that was sexual in nature. And I did get disciplined. My mom even put me on birth control, because it's like, you ain't finna have no baby up in here. Her and my dad, they called him and they asked him, hey, did you have sex with her? And he lied about it. He said that nothing ever happened between us. He said that I was calling him like I lived there, which, he was in a different state. And I'm just like, no, he asked me to call him. When he said that, it broke my heart. When he said that I was crazy, he didn't know why I was calling him and stuff like that, it really, really hurt. When I entered into the 9th grade, I had turned 14. I made it up in my mind. I said, you know what? I'm gonna go find me a boyfriend. That was my plan. And I waited until my dad went to work, because my dad worked at night. My mother, she actually went to bed early. And by this time, I, had my actually 2 sisters now. So what I started doing was I snuck out the house. I remember walking the streets, and I was like, I'm going to find me a boyfriend. Because again, I was 13 and he was 19, and I thought that I was so in love. So that particular night, I walked around. We had lived near a park, and I remember just walking. And I want to say it was probably about 11 o'clock at night. And I heard somebody say, psst, 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 come here. So I walked towards the spitting sound, and this guy began to ask me questions. He was like, what's your name? How old are you? I told him my name. I told him that I was 14. He was like, you're not 14. I said, I am 14. And then he asked me if I was a twerker. And at the time, I thought a twerker was a prostitute. So I'm like, no, I'm not a twerker. He was like, yes, you are. I said, no, I'm not. So then he came up, he began to walk closer to me, and then he put his hand in between my legs. And because I was used to that. I was used to female cousins doing that. I was used to male cousins doing that and strangers doing that. So I'm just like, okay. So when he did that, he was like, oh yeah, you a twerker. So get in the car and holler at my homeboy. So I'm like, okay. And age 14, I had never been penetrated. So when I got into the car with his homeboy, with his friend, I remember I opened the passenger door. So I got into the car. Where the car was parked at was actually parked in front of the homeboy's house. So I got in the car. I wasn't even nervous. I just was like answering all this person's questions, because he asked me the same question. I told him my name. I said, I'm Kristina. I'm 14. He was like, you're not 14. I said, I am 14. Like every guy that I had an interaction with, I told him my actual age. What he did was, he began to touch me and caress like my breast and things like that. So I took my underwear off and I stuffed them under the seat. And I think the reason why I did that because they were like, people said like granny panties or granny underwear. And I'm like, I'm gonna take these off and put them under the seat. So then we had sex. So essentially that was actually my very first time having sex with a man and being penetrated. Also at age 5, I had developed an addiction, not only to the pornography, but also I began to use something called air freshener, the aerosol air spray that you keep in the bathroom. I remember being at my relative's house and I was sitting in the restroom and I began to spray that into my mouth, like inhaling the fumes and just spraying it and experiencing like this euphoric feeling. So that actually lasted from age 5 to age 11. Just like nobody knew until I was age 11 and my mom actually caught me and I was foaming out of the mouth. So it's like I could have died at that point. So in the car with this man, I want to say he probably was like maybe 18 or 19. After I had sex with him, then the guy who first asked me to get into the car to talk to him, he got into the car. And then he was like, hey, let's get in the back seat, and then end up having sex with him. So then when I thought that I was done, I began to like put my clothes back on and proceed to get out of the back seat of the car. There was another guy that came and he began to push me back into the car. And he said, oh, it's my turn. I'm like, okay. So had sex with him. And then once he was done, he got out the car. Then another guy got in. So again, to remind you, age 14, never ever had sex before. And this was my first experience. And then once the fourth guy was done, then I got out of the car. The last 2 men that I had sex with, they asked me, could I come back with them back to one of their homes or their houses? And I did that, had sex with them in some backyard. And I believe at that time I had developed an addiction to that, an addiction to sex at that time because it was like an adrenaline rush. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have any of that. I was just out, just being silly, making poor choices at that time. But I feel like with everything, with the molestation beginning so young, I felt like that was just something that my body became accustomed to, and I began to allow my body to be used in that way. While I was walking home, there was another guy. He came, he was riding on a bicycle, and all these were grown men, and all of them again asked me the same question: what's your name? Where are you from? How old are you? And I'm like, I'm 14. And then they all say, no, you're not. No, you're not. I'm like, yeah, I'm 14. So the grown man on the bicycle, when he seen me walking home, he told me, he was like, you shouldn't be out this time of night. And I'm like, okay. So he said, I'm gonna walk you home. I said, okay, cool. He said, yeah, I just want to make sure you get home safe. So as we were walking, I had him and I like turned down the alley because like in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I'm not gonna let him know exactly where I stay, but it's late. So as we begin to walk down the alley, he got off his bicycle and then he grabbed my hand and then he lured me to someone else's backyard and then had me get in a certain position and then had sex with me. So that was the fifth guy, that first time for me having sex, and that was at night outside. Once I made it back inside the house, I snuck back in through the back door and then got me a shower. It was probably about 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30. So I was out from 11 p.m. until about 5 or 5:30 in the morning. School at that time, I think they passed a law for school to start later for high schoolers, but at that time, school for me started, you had to be to school by like 6:50 or so. So I just automatically jumped into the shower, washed up. I remember that first night, like just washing up and seeing a lot of blood on my washcloth and not really understanding it, but I said, hey, if this is what it takes for me to have a boyfriend, I'm all for it. And again, it was me trying to find what I thought I had in that 19-year-old. And when I did that, I would go to the same area, and each night the crowd became larger. So they would have me get into the car, into the Cutlass Supreme, and then into the back seat, and then guys would take their turns. So some nights it'll be 2 guys, and then some nights it'll be 20. And while I would be in the back seat with one of the guys, there'll be other men just banging on the window saying, hey, it's my turn. This one particular night, I remember getting with these guys. They live kind of far from where we lived at the time, but it was the adventure. Pick me up, go off with them. These were big time. I remember getting into the back seat and there was another girl who was in the back seat, but these were different guys who lived further away from the other guys that I was involved with. She looked like she was at least about my age, maybe 14 or so, but I digress. There was two men already in the car. One of the guys, he ended up sitting in the back seat because they were actually on their way to pick up someone else. So it was the girl, she was sitting behind the driver, and then one of the homeboys, he was sitting in the middle, and then I sat behind the actual passenger seat. And this particular night, we got into a high-speed police chase. And as we were trying to reach our destination, that's when the police had gotten behind us, and I'm seeing the police lights just like flashing like crazy. And I remember the driver, he turned around. I'll say their nicknames because people don't know. So nickname Popcorn, right? So say Popcorn. He looked out the back window. He was the one driving, and it's like he did like this, like he spit. I don't know. It was weird, but once he realized that the police was actually behind us and the police is actually telling us that we need to get out the car, but he decided that he wanted to put his foot on the gas and go like really fast. So here it is, 2:00 in the morning. We're like weaving through the little traffic there is, going down alleys and back roads and other streets and stuff like that to try to shake the police, which we did. And I didn't think about dying. I didn't think about any of that. I remember us driving past the church that I used to attend as a child, and not even thinking, no conviction, no nothing about God. It was just the adrenaline rush, So once we shook the police, we were able to go pick up this another homeboy. He got in the car, and these are all grown men, right? And we end up arriving to this place that looked like, and it's like an old hotel or something like that, like an efficiency apartment. And I remember getting out, but as I was getting out, the young girl who was also in the backseat with me, like our eyes met, and it was almost as if like I knew that the driver was going to take her somewhere to do to her what they were getting ready to do with me, because I had already had sex with these guys before, but this particular night was very different. So the driver told the homeboy, I'm going to go drop her off. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. But our eyes met. I actually wrote a letter to her. I don't know, maybe she might see this video because you guys have the most amazing stories. But what I want to tell her is that, that I love you, that God loves you. If I could have grabbed your hand and ran away with you that night, I would have. But I apologize. Once Popcorn pulled off with the girl in the car, the two guys got out, and I got out with them, went inside the little efficiency hotel, and I remember going into this room. It was dark. They kept the lights out, but you could see the street light that was piercing through the actual blinds. And what I did notice, this one bed, and there was a hot plate on the actual dresser. So there was probably about 9 guys in the room, and I had sex with all 9 of them. And I remember they were recording, so they had a video just recording all the sex acts and different things as such. In the midst of this, while I'm out there wilding out, doing some crazy things, having sex with all these random men, I was in an abstinence program. My mother had us join the church when I think I was like 8, and I was very active. I was active in youth group and ushering. It was like I was literally living a double life. Sometimes even after class, some of the guys might be waiting for me, whether at the other house or in the car, or they'll be waiting for me in the bathroom, and then I would have sex with them in those random locations. And my parents, the whole time, they're thinking I'm going to the abstinence program. And I was so well at what I did, I excelled even in the abstinence program, that they had me become to speak at one of the main events, because they really admired just who I was, but not knowing again that I'm getting buck wild. Eventually, with all of that, walking out, doing all that stuff, it was one day I just decided I didn't want to do it anymore. I really tried, and when that happened, I remember I want to say 2 weeks later, some guys, for some reason, I don't know how they figured out where I lived, they began to knock on the window, and then it began again. The cycle began again. Parents found out about it from a relative who eventually had asked me to have sex with him. To fast forward with my life, age 15 is when I surrendered my life to the Lord. It's like my life changed drastically, and the things that I was doing, I realized that I wasn't just hurting myself, but I was breaking God's heart, and I didn't want to do that. Years later, I rededicated my sexual purity to God. And when I did that, I was like, no, I'm not having sex. I'm serious about this thing, man. But I ended up running into a high school friend at college, and we kicked it off. Everything was well. I ended up going to his apartment one day, and that's when he raped me that particular day. He kept apologizing for what he did. He asked me, can he redo what he did to try to make up for what he had done to me. And then there was another incident. I got into a relationship with another guy. This particular person, I told him, because at this time I had abstained from sex for 4 years, and I told him I wasn't going to have sex, all because of my love for the Lord and me being in ministry and wanting to like be an example. He began to tell me things like, oh, well, you probably got AIDS. That's why you don't want to have sex with me. And I was like, that's not true. Then he told me that he felt like God told him that I was his wife. And I said, well, you know, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. So I'm like, well, God didn't tell me that you're my husband, but maybe this is what we're supposed to do. So what happened with him was, you know, I kept telling him, like, listen, we're not going to have sex. One particular day, I ended up going to his apartment. At this time, I found out that he was struggling really bad with and because my dad had struggled with that and he overcame that, I felt like, well, hey, if my dad could do it, you could do it. And I just wanted to like be there to help him. So this particular night, I was at his place and we were talking, and I already knew in my mind that I wasn't going to have sex with him because like my period was on. So like, I don't know, there's just somewhere like, oh, we not having sex. No, we're not going to do it. However, I remember laying across the bed with him, and he was like, you know, I want you to stay with me a little bit longer. I said, no, I gotta go. And then that's when he proceeded to just grab on me and pull on me and pull on me. And I'm like, dude, like, what the heck are you doing? Like, I told you no. And I already told you, like, if you think that I'm supposed to be your wife, I want to wait until we get married. So I remember him getting on top of me, just holding me down and violating me sexually. And I remember after he was done, there was like blood all over the bed. There was blood all over his t-shirt and his short. Once he came and completed what he wanted to complete, he jumped up, he ran into the bathroom to go clean himself up. I remember actually getting up, trying to fix my clothes and get myself together, and I walked to the door, and I remember trying to open it. He ran out of the bathroom. He stood in front of the door, tried to block me from getting out. Eventually I was able to get out, and I tried to run to my car. He chased me to the car. He kept apologizing for what he did. I blocked his number for a little while, but then I started feeling bad about it. And it's like that guilt. I got back into the situationship with him because I thought that maybe I'm supposed to be his wife. You know, this is, you know, he messed up, he made a mistake. But also having that sexual act done to me and had been having sex for over 4 years and abstaining, it brought back that taste. So we began to just have sex. But the relationship, it was emotionally draining. He was emotionally abusive. He always would bring my past up. It was just convicting, and it made me feel shamed and disgusted. And it took a long time for me to actually break off the relationship with him. Fast forward to current situation, my husband and I, we met via Facebook. We were Facebook friends for probably like a good 8 years, and he would post all these inspirational posts and things like that, and I knew that he was a believer. And in my heart, I'm like, you know, that's somebody that, not him in particular, but someone like him that I could actually see myself with, like, someday. And one day, because I loved encouraging single women while me being a single woman at the time, and he seen one of my posts, and he's like, started messaging me and telling me how he want to be my knight in shining armor. And I'm like, what? Okay. And I think I let a lot of insecurities like push him away, but he kept pursuing me. And when we eventually started talking, November 2016 is when, like, he started putting all this stuff in my inbox. And he does poetry. He write poetry like I do. So he'll put like all this poetry stuff in my inbox, and I ignored him, or I tried to run away and run. And I think because I was still holding on to the things that I did as a youth and not making so great of choices, and being in an emotionally abusive relationship, in a sexually abusive relationship, and not really understanding my true worth. But when we began to talk, we talked on the phone for the very first time in December of 2016, and it almost felt like God was telling him my secrets, because it's things that I would pray about and my husband would actually like talk about, and I'm just like, what? This is crazy. He pursued me, and in January 2018 we got married. and we've been married ever since. It's been a very beautiful experience, and one of the things I like to share about this story is that even though I had sex with all these different people in my past, my husband is the first man that I actually gave myself to. I feel completely free. I feel like myself. I feel like God chose him just for me. And my husband, he did have a son prior to us being married. We have a beautiful son. I'm a bonus mom to him. He's 17. He'll be 18 soon. So that's my story. And I did release a book. It's titled Suppressed Wounds, Redemption and Recovery. And it's just kind of goes over everything about my life and where I'm at now.